We also continue to follow a major developing story out of Ottawa today. A deal has been struck between Google and the federal government over its Online News Act. That act, Bill C-18, was passed in June. Its purpose is to make large digital companies pay news organizations when someone goes to a web story through a link on one of their products. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now live with the details on this. Okay, what have you learned, Janice?
The C-18 laid out criteria for who would have to comply with this Online News Act. Essentially, you'd have to have more than 20 million users, readers, watchers, and over $1 billion in revenue. That basically means only, for now anyway, in Canada, Meta and Google were caught up in it. Meta did not want to comply with the new law, now blocks content from news organizations on its platform. Google had threatened to do the same by the end of the year if its concerns were not addressed. But now, according to sources who spoke to both CBC News and Radio Canada today, a deal has been reached. And so those links will not be blocked for the foreseeable. The amount of money involved. So the legislation requires Google to compensate news content creators, essentially professional mainstream news organizations, professional journalists who, comply with sort of criteria for that professional journalism, things like having an ombudsman and, subscribing to professional standards. It requires that those news organizations that provide that content be compensated. The government had estimated earlier this year that an appropriate amount of compensation might be $172 million. In fact, this deal, according to sources, is that Google is going to be perhaps compensating closer to what it originally wanted, which was about $100 million rather. So short of what the government originally thought would be appropriate, more in line with what the company wanted, there will be some changes to the regulations involved with implementing this law. Those are expected in about 2 weeks. But again, this is the result of trying to address Google's concerns, among them that it did not want to be having to negotiate a deal with each and every individual news organization. It was only prepared to sit down with sort of one group on behalf of all the news organizations. So it couldn't be, for example, tied up in arbitration in court with various ones niggling over different details. So we don't know yet what that single organization negotiating on behalf of all the news outlets will be. That remains to be seen in this. But this is being characterized by government sources as a first step, and also something that's really essential to ensure the viability of media organizations going forward and to restore balance between commercial platforms online. So we will watch to see if any now government officials come out and brief journalists, hopefully in the coming hours, about the specifics of this, but that's what's known so far.
And now, Janice, as you outlined there, this is only one part of the story of the online news ecosystem. Where do things stand with other platforms that certainly have been in talks with Ottawa?
Yeah, so Meta, this will not apply to them. They continue to block news links if people have tried to share content from CBC or other Canadian, news outlets. They will already know that already. And so we have to, I think, also have a conversation about what was at stake here, not just financial compensation. And an important part, for the media involved in this is disclosure and transparency. And I want to say that we don't know of that potentially $100 million, exactly how much different individual news organizations would receive. Although in the case of CBC, any money it received out of this would be disclosed eventually in terms of its annual reports about revenue. So important for our audience to understand that. Also important for them to understand that our links, shareability of our links, also something at play here. But as we pull back and look at sort of the bigger picture of this from a democratic values point of view, it is essential to have verified facts on which to vote, on which to act as citizens. Difficult to have verified facts if all sort of professional news is no longer findable, searchable, available on Google, very dominant platform in terms of people's online information lives. And not having that, instead sort of having people find potentially misinformation information, unverified sources, unbalanced sources when they go looking for information, could have been very risky. So in that respect, this is important. Quite apart from any sort of financial impact for various organizations, there is kind of a bigger almost principle at stake here, a bigger benefit at stake that should be positive going forward. So perhaps a deal both sides really needed to make, but indeed they do have a deal, and more details to come.
Thank you for this, Janice. That's the CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa.